So what we're going to do in this video is look at the relationship between the emissions trading scheme and the goal of full employment. Now, as we talked about in previous videos, the emissions trading scheme conducts a cap and trade system. And this is where the polluters, or the main businesses, buy and sell carbon permits to pollute. So before, where there wasn't this emissions trading scheme, businesses were allowed to pollute as much as they want and as much as they needed. But now, since the government is more focused on ecological sustainability and the sustainability of our environment into the future, they've implemented this environmental policy called this emissions trading scheme in order to force businesses to cut down their production or their pollution in their production methods, so as to protect the environment. So a recap of the goal of full employment. We know that the goal of full employment is achieved when there is no cyclical unemployment. So at this point, everyone who wants a job can find a job. That's the basic rule of thumb. And so cyclical unemployment is due to a low aggregate demand. Now, there are different types of unemployment, and you can look at the different types of unemployment on our video designed on looking at the different types of unemployment under the playlist of the government goal for employment. But the two broad types of unemployment are cyclical and what we call natural unemployment. So the government realizes that natural unemployment must always occur, and the main type of natural unemployment is this idea of structural unemployment. So this is when there is a mismatch between the worker's skill and the skills required of them for the job. So what we're going to do in this video is look at the relationship between the emissions trading scheme and how it impacts the goal of full employment. So of course, we're going to look at this in both in the short run and in the long run. So we're going to divide this video into two. We're going to look at how it impacts the goal of full employment in the short run, as well as the long run, what we call the short term or the long term. So we're going to start off with the short term impacts on full employment. Now, we talked about how businesses act to maximize profit. So businesses seek to maximize profit. And what drives these businesses is the idea that they are able to put a markup on their production costs. However, with this emissions trading scheme and how they have to buy or sell permits in order to pollute, this means the cost of these permits actually add on to their business costs. So we're going to note here that permits increase production costs. And this increases production costs, especially for firms that are intensively driven by using coal to generate their power. So these heavy polluting firms actually become very much worse off because they now are required to buy permits in order to pollute. And so what happens here is that this may drive inefficient businesses out of work. So those firms that can't cope with this increase in production costs, and those businesses who operate in a very elastic market, this will result in a decrease in market power. And as a result, because of their substitutability, because of their demand elasticity, these firms will be driven out of business and therefore close down. So as a result of this would lead to structural unemployment. So in the short run, we can see that because production costs have increased, and in order for these businesses to compete both internationally and domestically, they must cut costs in some way. And the most obvious way to cut this is to decrease their labour intake. So as a result, that would increase structural unemployment because there is now a mismatch between the worker's skill and what the business requires of them. Of course, they're not going to fire the CEOs, they're not going to fire the white-collar workers. So the blue-collar workers or the non-skilled labourers, they would find their jobs at risk because their skills can be taken from anywhere. These businesses may outsource to overseas labourers, and so as a result, domestic low-skilled workers or blue-collared workers may in fact lose their jobs because of this increase in price. And this, I must stress, is only in the short run. So what's going to happen to employment in the long run, or the goal for employment in the long run? Well, of course, because these permits actually cost money, this means businesses are encouraged to move to what we're going to call greener. I'm just going to put this in green actually, just to make it a little bit more visual for those visual learners out there. So you can move to greener options. So what these greener options mean are these production methods that rely on solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, for example, energy. And because these four sources of energy don't require carbon permits, this will allow these firms to become more internationally and domestically competitive. So it allows these firms to increase their market share. Because although they use solar, wind, geothermal, hydro energy, they don't require to purchase these carbon permits, and as a result, they are able to lower their price and therefore increase their market share. And so because consumers are rational, we're assuming, they're going to purchase the lowest cost alternative. And so by encouraging businesses to move to greener options or greener ways to produce, this would actually create new jobs in this sector. So new jobs will be created. So instead of jobs being created in coal mines, they may be created in situations such as in sectors such as the solar energy sector or the wind energy sector or the hydro energy sector. So new jobs here will be created, and the projection is that if this cap and trade system goes ahead, is that it'll be 30 times. There will be 30 times more jobs in 2050 than there are now. So jobs will increase 30-fold by 2050. So that's around 35, 36 years from now. And so this would actually create more jobs. And as a result, structural unemployment, those people who have a mismatch between their skill and the requirements of the labour force, may decrease because they may develop new skills, they may enter a different sector of the workforce, and as a result, because there are new jobs being created, in the long run, unemployment, or the goal for employment, may be achieved. So that's the relationship between the emissions trading scheme and the goal for employment. In the short run, it may hinder it, but in the long run, this environmental policy may help improve the goal of full employment.